Welcome everyone to the MLOps Live webinar series, the place where we talk about bringing data science to production and seeing real business value from your AI and AI initiatives. Really happy to see you all here with us today. We've got a fabulous session coming right up. My name is Edith, and I'm the head of community and open source marketing at Aguasio, acquired by McKinsey. And today we're going to be talking about transforming enterprise operations with Gen AI. In today's webinar, we're going to be covering the main Gen AI use cases, challenges to be mindful of during implementation, and key learnings from different projects. It'll highlight the three main pillars: the people, processes, and technology. We have a few very exciting demos to share with you as well. Today, we are looking forward to having Dinu, partner and operations hub lead from McKinsey, who will be diving into the challenges, solutions, and top use cases of Gen AI for operations. He will discuss the impact of Gen AI across different industries, the value creating opportunities across all functions of the operations value chain while creating a long-term strategic vision. Then Nicolas, Senior Program Delivery Analyst, and Davide, Research Science Analyst, will dive into a few really interesting demos. At the end of the webinar, Yaron Chaviv, co-founder and CTO of Aguasio, will run the interactive Q&A session. We're very, very happy to have them all with us here today. Now, a few housekeeping items. This webinar will be recorded and sent to you after the webinar. There is no need to worry if you miss something. We've got you covered. As always, we'll be taking your questions live. I know this is always an interesting part of the webinar. So in order to make sure we don't miss any of your questions, please make sure to use the Q&A tab on the bottom of your screen, not the chat, the Q&A tab throughout this session, and we'll do our very best to get to all of them. We'll also be running 2 polls during the session, so please do fill those in. We'll make sure to share the results with you all at the end of the webinar. We'd like to invite you now to join our MLOps Live community where we'll be continuing the conversation afterwards and answering any additional questions that you may have. And now we're going to put everyone on mute, and we'll be recording the session so that we'll send it to you right after. Without further ado, we'll get this party started. I'm very happy to invite Dinu to begin.
Thank you. Welcome everyone, and thank you for attending in such large numbers this session. Let me start with a bit of introduction, right? So Gen AI is the logical continuation of a whole evolution, right? That did not arrive only at the end of 2022, right? It took place since the 50s with artificial intelligence. But why today, and why is this an evolution? I think we're now in a perfect storm where it finally hits our lives. I think everyone has played with ChatGPT. We can all store information much faster. We can all generate text. And I think this is due to a couple of factors that have come together in the last year and a half. First of all, huge computing power that allows to process data at an amount and speed never seen before. Second, we have access to an abundance of data through the internet, which allows to train models on this data. And third, we now have pre-trained transformers or GPT, which allows us to also work with unstructured data. So in this context, I wanted to touch upon 5 topics to kick us off. First of all, where do we stand today? Second, how ambitious should you be in your responsibility, but also with the management teams you belong to? Third, we would like to go a bit deeper into operations and understand better where the money sits. Fourth, we will look into how should you attack it, how should you scale it, which scaling is always the biggest question and the biggest challenge. And then finally, of course, we will cover how to think about building the right foundations and managing the risks associated with Gen AI. So maybe if we jump to the next page and start with where we are today. And if you maybe allow me to simplify, I mean, we still have the traditional AI, right? And I think we've all been there. We know what deep learning is. We know how this can help based on real data, train models, and build sophisticated algorithms, whether it is for predictive maintenance, for finding the optimum set parameters in a production environment, or forecasting algorithms in a supply chain. So we're familiar with all of that, right? And traditional AI works with structured data and is able to predict and also develop very sophisticated deep learning models that can solve particular problems. I think what's interesting now with the beauty of Gen AI is that this is different, right? Gen AI works with large unstructured data models. It allows to generate content, but also synthesize large amounts of content. But it also has what we would call maybe almost a human behavior, the ability to invent content, which is also a danger. So it's not only what you would predict to happen, but also, I'm sure you all heard of it, hallucinations. It may come up with outcomes you don't know. And this is why we need to always constantly verify the outcomes. So it's good to have this distinction in mind. But at the same time, we're seeing AI and Gen AI getting more and more together, right? We're currently seeing Gen AI models that are able to steer AI models. And we have here an opportunity more and more to see these worlds converging. For example, Gen AI that can convert speech to text, and then from this text, it can control AI models. So it's a significant development as we see these worlds being connected. Now, we believe this whole evolution is just at the beginning, right? And this is really our core belief, to be very clear. As you know, we work a lot with the industry. We've done with our McKinsey Global Institute a lot of analysis, and we see that indeed many organizations are tapping into Gen AI. They're piloting, they're trying, they're also capturing low-hanging fruits. But by no means we see organizations really thinking through and tapping into the full art of the possible. The areas where we see Gen AI most present is in consumer-facing industries, but in particular, you have the collaboration between the company and the consumer. And it's easy to use that to think about working on new products, new development platforms. But we have not yet seen the full potential being scaled across companies end to end. Now, we have here some examples of companies that have just started with Gen AI. And just to be clear, this is all public information, so we're revealing nothing based on our client work here. We could have also chosen different names, but many companies speak very openly about their Gen AI pilots, right? And you see here some examples, negotiation booths, synthetic data to retrain vision systems, AI assistants for supply chain questions or common customer questions. And there are many more of these examples, right? We see the current solution and tech providers also that are putting Gen AI into their products. For example, SAP, Microsoft, AWS, right? So players from all parts of the value chain are contributing. And we also see more and more of the common application we're used to, for example, email, browser, that will be more and more Gen AI powered, right? And this is not just an outcome. Since the last year, we've seen these products emerging, and you also have the first licenses you can actually buy, right? So it has just started, and it will become more and more common in the months and years ahead. Now, we truly believe that there is an economic value from Gen AI, actually a huge economic value. Across industries, we expect probably the equivalent of the UK GDP, to give a comparison. So more than $4 trillion that could be generated from deploying of Gen AI application at scale. And from this value, about a third comes from operations. And then the remainder bit split half between marketing and sales and software engineering, right? And as you can see here, this spans across different industries. And here, I mean, what this number shows is a combination of size of the value pool, and also in the end, how many activities can be actually automated within that sector, right? And we only speak here, by the way, about efficiency. We haven't yet quantified the effectiveness, because that just is too early and much harder to assess. But you see, of course, from high tech at the high end to agriculture at the low end, where the opportunities lie. Of course, agriculture is very physical and the interactions with the customer are lower. However, I also know many examples there of, for example, advisors for farmers, right? In terms of what crops to apply. There are, a very common use case that's been deployed, and personalizing this type of recommendations based on context of farmers and regions. We also see retail with people at the forefront. We see banking leading the pack. We also see advanced industries, consumer, healthcare, as other sectors where there is a significant value. So I hope you can all recognize some of the industries that you're active in. And again, this is only the potential from efficiency and not including the upside from effectiveness. Now, I initially framed the traditional AI versus generative AI, right? And I actually believe that the interconnection between these two will continue to evolve and will become stronger and stronger. There's really an interplay between the two, and there's also a number of common prerequisites that need to be put in place, where traditional AI plays an important role to enable full value capture from Gen AI. And you can see here that the total value that we estimate from combining traditional AI with Gen AI is typically 3 to 5 times higher than if we would only apply Gen AI alone, right? For example, if you think about an R&D use case, you can look at everything which is text-to-text convergence, right? That the R&D colleagues do. And there are proven pilots and co-pilots, right, that help guide and navigate this type of exercises and make it more and more efficient. But I think when it becomes really interesting is when you combine text-to-text with deep learning mechanism that help you, for example, solve complex chemical processes around thermodynamic problems, or if you go into more sophisticated AI tools that allow you to do testing and simulations. So that allows actually to use not only Gen AI, but combined Gen AI with traditional AI to tap into the full potential. So how to think about this? There are at least 2 steps to consider in this journey. We see actually many of the players that are close to cracking the first step. You see here some examples, right? For example, the document generation that many of you are familiar with, the HR support and automation that you need to process when you have to deal with large amounts of data that have to be processed. We also see marketing text with personalized emails and further promotion that in the future can be done and tailored through Gen AI, right? But the truly interesting thing here is not only to think about these first steps in efficiency, but also take a step back and think about the entire journey of reimagining your company, right? So, for example, what if you could do complete code generation end-to-end in the software domain? Think about how you could completely reduce or refocus your IT cost by automating a lot of this code generation, right? Think about a completely different way of segmenting your customer base, going into completely hyper-personalized products. And there's really no limit on what could be done in a future Gen AI enabled world. And it's our conviction that we're now currently only scratching the surface here versus the art of the possible. So now being a bit more concrete into operations, and I don't know how big your your screen is. We will not go into all the details, and actually we will focus on bringing some of these examples to life. But you see here some of the examples of use cases which we see proven across the value chain. And maybe the main message to give here is that Gen AI creates both opportunities, great opportunities, but these great opportunities come with great challenges as well. And why do I say this? Because in any function you take across operations, you will not find just one use case, but you end up finding tens or hundreds of use cases. We've done many workshops. We work with the industry a lot, and we've done ideation sessions across the different functions. And we see, for example, use cases that we find in R&D processes that can help automate unstructured data, go through applications of text conversion, and this can benefit a lot in their effectiveness and efficiency. The challenge is that depending on your industry, this will depend on many things to have an impact on your P&L. We've seen a few years back when we started digital journeys in manufacturing or in supply chain, that's a bit similar to Gen AI today. Having one or two use cases is not enough. You need to really enable value end-to-end across a domain, across a function. And that takes several use cases coming together, right? For example, you think of procurement, automate the creation of core procurement documents for RFPs or RFQs, combined with generating and adjusting contracts, combined with analytics for spend optimization, combined with coaching of negotiations with Gen AI, right? So all these use cases have to come together to really enable full value creation across a function, and it's not enough to look at individual ones. Here's a sanitized automotive OEM example that shows how much a company can be affected by Gen AI. And it's interesting that we found that up to 80% of activities would be touched by some form of AI or Gen AI. This includes all indirect processes and indirect production, planning, engineering, right? And across these functions, we see typically up to 25% of efficiency. This is a potential that we see realistically achievable within the next 5 to 10 years, and probably the short-term potential within the next 2-3 years is a quarter of that. But this is a journey, right? And a journey that will significantly transform these processes end to end. Now, before the demo, 2 more charts around scaling, right? And I think the most important message here is taking a strategic perspective is key, and typically much more important in terms of likelihood of success than the use cases themselves. Gen AI is clearly both an opportunity and a threat. And really, speed is of the essence if you want to focus more on the opportunity value capture than on addressing the threats too late in the process. You probably already have some use cases which are piloted across your organization. Those are typically a good starting point, but it's important to think here business back and think at domains end to end, to prioritize the most impactful business areas. I'll come back to this after the demo in more detail. Once that impact-backed strategic roadmap is clear, think about how do you ensure your organization can handle this? For example, from a capability perspective, what is the talent that you require? From a tech perspective, will you build something in-house? Will you work with third parties? We will cover these questions in more detail after the demos. And finally, how do you think about change management? How do you think about transitioning your organization? Now, not to come across as naive, we also need to speak about risk, right? And first of all, acknowledge that GenAI is new. It's a model where we only partially understand how these large models react to certain prompts and questions. We're getting better and better, but we're still at the beginning of the journey. There are clearly IP and data protection risks that need to be handled. Humans will always need to be in the loop to provide oversight, because the GenAI outcome is not always right. This can lead to solutions that can be hacked. The system will not be fair. It will not be always trustworthy or exclusive, right? So hence again, supervision is important. And then last but not least, ethical questions will need to be defined. And we should also observe how different regions, European regulations, other regulations in other regions will evolve, and how this can be managed proactively. But again, it's important here to define early on a framework with legal advisors. We should not be blinded by these issues, but we should also not be stopped by them, right? So I would suggest let us now jump into some of the use cases. There's a poll first to understand your starting point, and then we'll jump in the use cases and continue the discussion around implementation success factors.
Thank you so much, Dino. That was fantastic. Some questions came up in your presentation, but we'll save those for the live Q&A. We'll just go ahead and launch the first poll. So you should see this on your screen now. Where are you on your Gen AI journey? Please do let us know. Are you just learning about Gen AI? Do you have a specific use case? Have you actually begun building a Gen AI app? Do you have a Gen AI app in production? If you could just take a moment and answer that, it would be really helpful. I want to welcome Nicola and Davide. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you can dive into the demo, that would be great.
Of course, happy to. And really pleased to meet you all today. Indeed, together with Nicola, today we are going to guide you through a couple of demos and use cases that we experienced, we implemented, ranging from manufacturing to procurement and supply chain. Let's start with manufacturing first and talk about augmented operator. And let's spend 30 seconds to also understand the context where we introduce this demo. So let's imagine a manufacturing process with lots of machines in it, and one of the core machines, like the CNC machine, being one of the bottlenecks of the process. And let's focus on that machine. Indeed, we observed an unexpected high-frequency tool breakdown, and this machine is breaking down really often right now. So how did we tackle this problem in the past? Of course, this is a complex process that requires a lot of checking parameters, calling supervisor, checking manuals, assessing supplies, and so on. So pretty complex indeed. So let's see how this specific situation was tackled by our operator when it was introduced to the GenAI-powered maintenance advisor. Let's jump into the use case now. First of all, the operator starts by understanding the capabilities of the CNC Assist tool, which indeed can provide a broad spectrum of support functionalities, as you can see from here. The operator then goes on and tries to understand and explain the type of issue that he is facing, like the tool breaking that I was mentioning before, and asking for the most probable root cause of this type of defect, just as he would do like with a colleague or a supervisor. Well, while the indications on the CNC assistant are correct, these are not directly actionable. They are not really advices to solve the issue. So the operator asked to dig deeper and help him troubleshoot. You can see here throughout the troubleshooting sessions, the GenAI assistant also supports with executing some of the trigger checks with which the operator might not be familiar, by providing step-by-step introductions and asking for all the specific parameters to be checked, such as helix angle, as you can see here, tool material, machine configuration, temperature, and so on. Not only this, but the solution is also integrated with image processing capabilities, enabling the operator to upload pictures, like you can see in this case, where we uploaded some pictures on the chips coming out from the machines to have the system analyze them. While they continue investigating on the issue, they start getting closer to the root cause of the uncommon behavior of the machine. And it looks like right now, thanks to the temperature check, thanks to the other types of checks that were performed by the GenAI tool, the coolant filter replacement might be one of the core issues. Indeed, we see here that the coolant filter replacement has not been performed recently. So right now, the operator tries to understand how to change this specific component. It was the root cause of our issue, and the tool provides a full checklist to replace the component with detailed step-by-step tasks, supporting the operator in carrying out the maintenance activity. And you can see here all the details that were provided by the system. So to close, the tool provides a full augmenting of capabilities of the operator, and thanks to this, the operator was able, first of all, to improve efficiency of root cause identification, reduce downtime of the machine, and then to close also optimized maintenance cost. And this is, of course, one of the use cases that are applied in manufacturing, specifically in maintenance, but can be cross-ops because they basically can entail all knowledge bases from also other departments. With that, we are able to solve the issue, find the root cause, and have the tool replace it. This closes the first demo that we wanted to show for today. And let me hand over to Nicola, my colleague, to move into procurement and explore a little bit better that domain.
Happy to connect and warm welcome to today's webinar also from my side. I'm Nicola, and I would like now to present you Contract AI, which is basically our attempt to successfully automate contract analysis for the procurement office, which is now GenAI powered to basically generate insights and also providing rationales behind the analysis of the contract. So for those that might not be familiar with the contract analysis, it's a quite of a manual activity, which is time-consuming. Reviewing an industrial contract, assessing all the clauses can take half of a day. It's quite expensive and it should be prioritized. Therefore, you should also want to focus on those 20% of contracts that brings you 80% of values. Now we are going to jump on a demo where basically we are going to see which is the user journey of a team member of the procurement office to analyze and then generate insights on the basis of Contract AI. So here we're going to see our selection of which are the contracts that we're going to analyze. We're going to select all of them. And now basically the algorithm behind will therefore slice and dice the contract in all of these clauses, assessing them against a framework that we have basically created throughout the years, but also this can be then changed according to your specifications. And here now we can see that all those 251 contracts ranks as 7.5 average score. We have 50 million annual contract value, and 20% of them might be expiring within 1 year. And over here, we have also the list of which are those contracts that ranks as the lowest performing. On the left-hand side here, we have the contracts that are categorized according to their performance. So from worst in class to best in class. Maybe we want now to deep dive into the worst in class to understand how they perform against our framework that is divided into 3 main dimensions. So general terms and conditions, commercial terms and conditions, and partnership and contract governance. Here you will see basically all the contracts in a very visual and simple way, how they perform. And here we can deep dive in one specific sub-dimension for the first contract to understand which are the summary specification on this specific contract, as well, which is the scoring rationale. So why that specific contract in terms of term and termination flexibility might have a major potential for improvement. So if we focus on the second bullet point over here, we see that the contract does not include any termination for convenience clause. And now we can also deep dive on which is the rationale behind, and also here is where the GenAI power comes alive, because beyond providing the rationale, the tool is also capable of providing a suggestion. So here for the second line, we see that now the suggestion would be to negotiate and impose more flexible termination for convenience criteria to improve the ability to advance commercial position. So this is just one example of how GenAI can really unlock and enable value capturing for the procurement function. And now I'm handing over again to Davide to explore about supply chain.
Thanks a lot, Nicola. And in a supply chain landscape, many companies at these times are struggling to deal with volatility in supply chain, mainly driven by disruptions and inflation. So to deal with these challenges, we leverage GenAI to keep the planners or the broader supply chain team with advanced tools and copilots to help them in solving complex tasks in a matter of minutes. We will shortly have a look at our Control Tower copilot, and typically Control Towers will provide KPI overview in real time, while also giving the chance to deep dive on individual KPIs. And this amount of data and information sometimes makes the supply chain leaders struggle to take on-the-spot decisions on urgent gaps like OTIF, for example. Indeed, in our demo, we'll focus on OTIF. Let's see how we can identify the root cause behind OTIF in the scenario we built. So we can jump right now into the demo. We start from the overall control tower, as you can see here, from the overall dashboard, highlighting OTIF. And indeed, OTIF, as you can see, has been a struggle in recent months. So we want to deep dive on what happened. Let's first of all find out what is the region with the lowest OTIF. So let's ask the agent and the copilot what was happening. It looks like the region with the lowest OTIF, it is the Southwest business unit, and this is part of our supply chain network, of course. So let's deep dive even further. So what is the reason of low OTIF in this business unit? The solution right now will take some time to look at the underlying data, as well as historical data such as logs, trends, data analysis that was performed in the past, and provide some insights to the planner. It looks like low production adherence and non-optimal inventory allocation seem to be the major causes. You can see a percentage, a score here on what are the different causes. And of course, other causes with the lower percentage have been mapped by the solution. And the solution, of course, helps us in understanding a little bit more on what's behind this type of information. Also, digging deeper on that, it also helps us in building a chart as well to have a full picture of the situation. So you can see here that this is also generated by the copilot. Well, with all this information, then it looks like our planner has a full understanding, a full picture of what was happening. So we can now start troubleshooting and deep diving on the most probable buckets that that could have the issue fixed or that could lead to the issue. So we start from inventory, as it's one of the drivers for non-optimal allocation. Indeed, with the info provided by the AI assistant, the planner can now start the conversation with the broader team, having clear insights available to track the issue. Solution on top of this also help assessing on-the-fly scenarios. So we've just seen an example on how to deep dive into the root cause. On top of this, another feature that is not mentioned here, but of course the solution is capable of doing is creating scenarios, evaluating them, and asking the tool direct information like what happens if we increase OTIF by 10%, what are the scenarios that we're able to capture from it? And it will directly tell us what are the impact that we can evaluate and assess. So with this, let me hand over back to Dino, and in the meantime, feel free to post questions in the chat as we'll have a Q&A session later on to deep dive on your questions.
Super. So I hope this brought a bit to life a few examples. There's many more, but in the limited time we have, we prioritized a few just to bring to life the type of applications. Now, I think that the question on everyone's mind is how to get started. And we start on this page by framing visually what are the 4 main hurdles to overcome to get to a successful transformation. And maybe if we start from the end, what do we even mean with a successful transformation? So this refers to solutions that are continuously evolving and drive value. So first of all, there is a question around how do you scale these solutions across different users in your organization over time? But the second question is, do you have a solution that is able to adapt as well, right? Because think about it, when 3 months later after a successful pilot, there is an update of the underlying model, and changes were made to the layers of safety that are wrapping around these models, and then your performance suddenly drops. And if you don't have the right capabilities in place, you will have a problem to sustain even your existing and proven pilots, right? So as we think about failures, maybe we start from the beginning. There's failure to plan, which is, if we just stay on the previous page still for a second, failure to plan, which is the inability to get the organization to design the transformation. And here our belief is we always argue against a tech forward perspective and always starting impact back, and resist the temptation to roll out everywhere from the beginning. So start from really prioritizing problems, solving big problems for the users, right? This is what the planning stage is about. There is then the next step, which is having a start failure. When a plan is in place, but the organization fails to launch. And this is also a very common reason for this is not seeing risks early enough. So important here to involve early on the engineering team, involving the designers from the beginning, together with the risks team, so the legal team, so that you think proactively of any risks and not discover them once you're piloting a ready-made solution. The third failure is the pilot failure, when you're only getting the buy-in when you start the launch. So think about, are you answering the right question from the beginning? Involve the users from the beginning, prioritize based on impact, so that you avoid getting to piloting a solution that doesn't actually deliver impact or doesn't solve the right problem. And then finally, scaling. Scaling has its own series of challenges for GenAI. Of course, it has common characteristics with classic machine learnings, but there are also some new challenges that come with GenAI. And there's 2 of them I can mention. Most of the time you rely on LLMs, which are pre-built, whether they are fully closed or access through an API like OpenAI, or if they're open like the Llama model. In both cases, you will need to, at some point, transition from this model to another model as you start scaling. That is a challenge in itself, so you need to think about how you prepare for those transitions. And then there is also the consideration about the breadth of your audience, right? As these solutions can be attuned to different contexts. So if you think about deployment across regions, across cultures, across geographies, tailoring is important. So those are some of the failure modes to think about as you consider scaling. I think on the next page, there's more, from the surveys we've done, more examples of the typical challenges. First of all, strategy, of course, when you don't have a clear benefit or a clear value from the pilot. And this is again coming back to not taking the tech forward approach, but focusing on the big problems you solve and the impact you deliver early on. There's also an important element on the strategy, which is that the economics of Gen AI are different from classic AI. In classic AI, there's all the cost that sits around the data, the infrastructure, and bringing it all in one place. With Gen AI, you also have the cost of the actual usage of the model. So each request of the model has a cost attached to it. So that has to be also taken into account into the business case. Then we go into the capabilities, and here some of the failure modes are lack of talent and knowledge, lack of confidence in scaling in terms of the IoT infrastructure, suppliers not willing to subsidize pilots, or too many platforms. I think it's really important here to consider that these elements often come together, right? So, for example, if talent, you may have the right talent in the organization, but if the talent is not empowered because you don't have the right operating model, then you're not able to make the best out of it, right? And also with Gen AI, the skill set may be challenging, and because the Gen AI technology is different. So a Gen AI pipeline is much closer to software engineering than the classic statistical modeling of classic AI. So this skill set changes, and you need to bring new disciplines into the teams to be able different types of data. And then there's also questions here around developing the right data. What can be shared outside of your organization, and which data has to stay in-house? This again adds another constraint on the type of technology you may want to use to keep the data ring-fenced. So this is why all this talent, operating model, technology, and data, they're often closely interconnected, and it's important to have an agile approach when you address these buckets. I think this page has actually covered the framework that we take to proactively ask the right questions, always starting with the strategic roadmap, then looking at these capabilities and the interconnectivity between them. And then finally, last but not least, thinking about adoption and scaling. And I think what's interesting with Gen AI is that, at the beginning, it always seems easy to create the engagement because, everybody knows what Gen AI is. But I think where senior management conviction seems to be not so deep anymore is when you get to the actual deployment of the pilot and scaling. When it becomes real, that's where typically the buy-in appears less strong, right? It's important to think about that early on and to lock in the business case and commitment early on. To wrap it up, I think, and looking at the time, right, to allow for time for questions, I think it's important to start experimenting quickly with Gen AI, but not forget to invest in technical depth, change management depth, and regulatory depth. You can actually jump to the next page, to the last page. The way to achieve it is to thinking about a strategic roadmap that goes business and value back. Start delivery with a proof of concept with limited functionality, but demonstrate the value early on. And then finally, when scaling, think about how to redesign your organization to make the maximum use of your capabilities. Now, maybe some of these points I summarize with can sound like any other tech transformation, but I hope, from the details brought throughout this last hour, you can understand how Gen AI is different, and also the hesitation that some organizations can have in getting started. But from our experience, the opportunity is worth the journey. And again, getting started early on can ensure you focus on the opportunity versus the risk mitigation if you're a fast follower. So let's maybe in the last minutes we have open up for some questions.
Thank you so much, Dino. Before we do that, let's just, based on what you said, right? You were talking about challenges and pitfalls, and let's hear from everyone that's joined us. I'm going to launch the poll right now, and we really, really would love to hear from you. What There we go. It's launched. What are the biggest pitfalls that you may feel that makes you feel hesitant to start or scale your Gen AI journey? So this is, select as many as you feel. I believe a bunch of you may not just have one. There may be a few hurdles that you may feel. So do take a minute and just let us know your experience. Thank you all so much for letting us know where you are, what your biggest pitfalls are. I'm going to hand it over now to Yaron. If you could kick off the Q&A, that would be fantastic. I see a lot of questions that were asked.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I'll open the camera. So thank you. It was a pretty amazing session with lots of demos and lots of content. So thank you, Dino and Simon and Jan. So let's move to the questions. We have lots of questions actually. But let's start with Dino. Can you maybe start with the first question on can Gen AI replace the use of executive jobs, of business plans, and so on?
No, I think we're actually very far from that, right? I mean, we're still very early in the process of exploring the full potential of it. I think it can, first of all, make those jobs more efficient. And second of all, it can make them more effective. But I don't see today a risk of replacing them. Ultimately, judgment will still be needed. And supervision of these models will still be needed, right? So I think it's too early to make such a conclusion.
And let's move to the second question, and the complementary nature of traditional AI versus Gen AI. And maybe Simon, you can take it.
Yes, I'm happy to take this one. So I think it's important to see Gen AI as a tool amongst other tools, right, for what it is. So you'd have a hammer and a screwdriver, and I think the use cases that we're seeing, traditional AI, typical classification, machine learning model, or pricing models, or things like that, are still very much valid. And the best use cases combine the two. So for example, you'd have a model to identify what is the optimal price for each of your customers. And then maybe you'd have Gen AI generate a report on top of it to interpret those results and things like that. But often there's no need to replace a lot of what's already existing, because traditional AI, it does really a good job for what it was designed for. We think we actually see generative AI as a complement often to these models. So best to use both when possible.
Yeah, okay. And the next question, are there concrete proven results that the use of Gen AI is impacting operational and business results versus not using Gen AI, and concrete cases? I believe you covered some of it, but maybe you could go back to summarize that.
Yeah, so we definitely see impact of individual use cases that's very concrete, right? For example, we've implemented multiple times operator and technician co-pilots in maintenance that allow to actually do much more effective troubleshooting on the line, of various failure modes, right? And this is done based on using data that combines manuals of the production lines with previous standard operating procedures, with previous root cause analysis work that was done before, right? And what would have taken in a normal way of working, separate root cause analysis sessions and separate kind of documentation is now done by technicians within a matter of seconds, right? So it allows to do troubleshooting faster at the line and more effectively by actually identifying very quickly for each type of failure what are the most common hypotheses to test, right? Now, this doesn't give the ultimate answer. It doesn't give the perfect answer, but it speeds up the process a lot, right? And what happens as a consequence is that operators do each troubleshoot much faster, but also much quicker, right? So it's both a productivity gain, and we speak about even 30-40% for this type of jobs, but it's also the line stays up much faster, right? So there's much shorter breakdown times. So it's a dual effect. We've seen additional output of up to 5 to 10%, depending on how important these breakdowns are. And then we've seen productivity gains of 30% and above, right? So this is an example in maintenance and production. I think you've seen some of the examples around contract feedback and improvement, right? That also has a high productivity benefits. And there's similar examples across the entire value chain. But what we see still currently is, as you can hear, it's individual use cases with proven impact. We're yet to see a bit this kind of end-to-end domain transformations, which will bring these impacts together, connect the dots, and probably deliver much more value. I expect those to be already visible in the next probably 9 to 12 months.
Okay, so let's move to some technical questions from Larry. The time to train this MRO copilot and minimal data set size to be operationally accurate for this pilot launch. So maybe Jan, can you take that?
Yeah, happy to field that one. So most of these examples start with pre-trained, off-the-shelf large language models and really don't incorporate fine-tuning at all to get sufficient answers. So really the amount of time is just around gathering the right data sources to put into a RAG architecture. I think I saw that question mentioned too. And then you do that prompt engineering and intent recognition layering and a little bit of an establishment of like a knowledge graph on some of the information you put into the RAG to build some of that accuracy. And we usually see that taking about, at our pace, about 6 to 8 weeks to go from a templated out system to a pilot.
Yeah, and maybe you can address a couple of more technical questions here. First, what are some of the technical challenges in generating good responses? And then there's another one, is the chatbot connected to sensor data, predictive maintenance, API, and so on? You could probably see those questions.
Yeah, let me grab a couple of these. So is the chatbot connected to sensor data, et cetera? So yes, this is typically a RAG architecture. Any standard RAG pattern at this point is pretty effective here. We have occasionally connected these to sensor historians like OSI Pi or Wonderware or something like that through the same architecture, and you connect it to any predictive maintenance API or anything else you have with a reasonable enough API. Technical challenges and good responses. Usually hallucination is the biggest one we bump into because sometimes you want the same thing that generates hallucinations is the same part of the model that can generate useful troubleshooting answers like creative thinking and troubleshooting. So you're faced with this problem where sometimes this tool, you actually want a little bit of hallucination. If I'm trying to troubleshoot something, what are the top 5 things that I think could be wrong? Versus, sometimes you don't want any hallucination. If I'm just asking for an exact procedure, how do I replace such and such a component? I just want a verbatim thing from a manual somewhere. I don't want any hallucination. So adding a layer that does a little bit of intent recognition to figure if the question being asked, if the prompt is, I want to troubleshoot with the tool, or I just give me the exact answer, is a layer that often has to be added to these tools to keep it from using its imagination when it's not supposed to.
And there's another question here. What training do you recommend to upskill the talent in the organization in order to mitigate the talent gap? I think it's a more general question. So maybe Simon, can you take it?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me? Yeah, I'm happy to. So I think the training is going to be, depending on the role, right? It's going to be more or less minimal. So I think for any data scientist, I think the training here is going to be mostly around prompt engineering and learning how to monitor and track the results of those models. I think any data scientist is pretty used to experimenting with traditional AI. I think here there's going to be a couple of tweaks needed when it comes to generative AI, but mostly the life cycle, the management is going to be the same. I think for others that are more involved into deploying these models, so that's data engineers, software engineer, cloud architects, is really staying on top of the latest cloud services offerings that are being offered and the pipelines around these particular models, because those are they evolve very rapidly, and they're going to become key to go from experimentation to actually have something in production that brings impact. So again, for data scientists, look around specific techniques and approaches to testing these models, and for your typical software engineers, data engineers, learn around the specific pipelines and services that are being offered by the cloud vendors around those. That's what I would recommend.
There's another question. I'll take it. There is a question. Can AI be used to replace call center staffing? If yes, how long will it take to integrate? We actually had another MLOps webinar about service operations and call centers, where we showed how we can do training and analysis, and also real-time co-piloting for agents. So you can definitely reduce the amount of people in the call centers and improve the accuracy and the way you answer calls. We'll be more than happy to, since the webinar, we actually made a lot of advancement in that area with multiple clients. So we can share more details with anyone who's interested. And it's not that difficult. We've done projects, integrated initial solutions within a couple of weeks, and then obviously it takes more time to integrate it with the existing system and take it to production, but it's not enormous. I think we're done, sir, with the time now, Edith?
Yeah, we're running a little bit over, but there were so many questions. We wanted to try to get through as many as we could. We didn't get through all of them, so we're going to put a link in the chat now to our MLOps live Slack community, and we'll answer some of those additional questions there for you. I do just want to take a moment to share the poll results, as I promised. Let's share the results from the first question. Where are you on your Gen AI journey? So we can see here about 44% of you are just learning about Gen AI, 29% you've already begun building a Gen AI app, 16% have a specific use case, and 12 have a Gen AI app in production. It's really interesting to see the variety there. And let me go ahead and share the other poll that we had. Thank you everyone for taking the time. So here you can see the results for what are your biggest pitfalls. So here we can see lack of Gen AI maturity for 47%, then 44% unclear value roadmap. So that's, Dinu spoke a lot about the different types of value and what it can bring to your organization. So hopefully, that you can apply that to your use cases. 40% scaling AI from pilot to production, 36% existing technology or operating debt, 32% lack of quantifiable outcomes, and 26% how to design the human experience element. So that's really interesting. Thank you all again for taking the time to share share your experiences with all of us. At this point, I would like to invite you to log on to our website, iguazio.com/MLOps. There are previous sessions of the MLOps Live webinar series that you can browse through and just take a look at your convenience. There are lots of blogs, best practices, case studies, and a lot of resources for you. So feel free to check that out and let us know what you think. And at this point, I just want to thank Dinu, Nicola, Davide, Yaron, Simon, Ian, and all of our speakers and everyone who joined us for this fantastic presentation. And thank you, all of you that joined us, took the time out of your busy day for the great questions, engagement in the chat, and really sharing your feedback with us. We really, really appreciate all of you joining us today. So we do these once a month. We look forward to seeing you at our next session. We'll share the details. Stay tuned. Thank you all so much. Have a great day.
Thank you all.